Quran reveals much of what the Jews and the Christians used to hide.
Oh, really?
Now, of course, the Jew and the Christian doesn't like to hear that.
How did they hide it? How can you hide any? How can you hide something in the book?
Some of the Quran back to the Muslim. But they do it badly, is what I'm trying to tell you. They
You
quote
hope?
it back badly in this way. They try to make it serve their purpose. There's no escaping it. The Quran says the Jews and the Christians hide things, they change things, and so on. So there's no sense.
I mean, they corrupt all his words. I thought the Quran said all his words couldn't be corrupted.
That everything in the Bible is true, but that's what people do. In the 5th chapter of the Quran, they quote a verse, again if you excuse my Arabic, which says, وَأَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ بِالْحَقِّ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ مِنَ الْكِتَابِ. They quote this and it says, the translation is, speaking of the Quran, that it is sent down to the Prophet, it says, and we sent down to you the book, in truth, confirming that which they possessed of the book before.
And that's
You see,
false,
the Christian says,
right?
You see there, the Quran says the Bible is true.
Yeah, that's what the Quran
The
says.
Quran was sent down to confirm, to say it's truthful what they have in their
And
book.
now he's going to say that the Quran is lying?
That sentence says, if you stop there, but that's the middle of the sentence. There's 2 more words in the sentence. They are wa muhaiminan alayhi.
And he's going to say that they didn't guard it, right?
Sent down the book
That all his words can be corrupted,
that which they had of the book before this,
even though the Quran says all his words can't be corrupted.
watcher over it, their book. Muhaiminan is the Arabic word. Muhaiminan is an interesting word. It means quality control. You'd use a form of that word to designate the man in a factory who stands at the end of the assembly line
And he just couldn't do a good job of doing that quality control. In other words, all his words could be corrupted and changed and altered, even though the Quran says they can't be. In other words, it makes it a lie when the Quran says it confirms that which went before it, right?
You don't fool a Muslim by quoting that if he goes and looks it up himself and realizes he only read half the sentence. It's a dishonest quote.
Yeah, well, and how about Quran 568, which tells me, a Christian, that no ground to stand upon unless it stands firm upon the Injil?
Respond with great pain on their faces and say to the Muslim,
I bet he doesn't quote Quran 568.
He says, oh, how can you say that? How could you as a Muslim change the Quran? You couldn't do that. How could I change the Bible?
Yeah, how could I change the Bible? And there's so many versions of it. I mean, so many copies of it.
The Bible's not the same thing as the Quran. For at least 3 reasons. The Quran has always been in the hands of the people. Always. From the time of the Prophet, people wrote it down if they could write and they memorized it, so it's always been in the hands of the people. Nobody ever disagreed on what were the contents. The Prophet
Oh yeah, they did. Ever heard of Uthman? He burned 6 versions of the Quran because they were he's lying. They were Uthman. The Hadith talks about it. He burned 6 versions of the Quran because they were different.
The first table of contents to the Bible that reads the same as the contents of the Bible.
He only kept one version,
from the year 367,
which became the Quran that we have now.
Finally, they decided which books belong in the Bible. Point 1. Point 2. The Bible is in dead languages. The Quran is in a living language.
No, Hebrew is not a dead language, and neither is Greek.
Arabic, the language.
As a matter of fact, most of the Jews in Israel speak Hebrew.
Ancient Aramaic.
I mean, yeah. Hebrew is not a dead language.
A handful of scholars.
You can call it a dead language, but it's not. The Jews speak Hebrew. It's not a dead language.
Change it. It's an easy thing if you're a translator to read one thing and tell somebody something else. That's easy. 3rd point. There has never been so much as a letter in dispute about the Quran. No one has even so much as said this letter is wrong in your copy of the Quran, unless it's a misprint. But nobody ever disputes. It should be this, it should be that, and we have a battle over it.
Oh yeah?
Whereas the Bible has come down from many, many manuscripts.
The Quran says that the earth was formed first, and then the sky. And then it contradicts it by saying the sky was formed first.
Down here it says, or this verse might be, and it gives you an alternate translation, or what some other manuscript says. So when somebody says, I mean, it's a shallow argument if somebody says, look, Muslims can't change the Quran, how could Christians change the Bible? It's because they're 2 different kinds of thing.
But they're supposed to be both all his words. And again, the Quran says all his words can't be changed.
The Bible is not a Muslim idea. It's not Muslims who became the enemies of the Bible somehow.
Oh, yes, they are.
They're not enemies of the Bible.
Yes, they are, because they say it's
The
corrupted.
doubtful authenticity of the Bible is an old idea found within the Bible.
And you're attacking the Bible.
It's a biblical idea. See, if you ask the question, who wrote the Bible? I mean, who took the ink and the pen and put the words on?
God wrote the Bible using
The answer, the
humans
scribes.
to be his pens. That's what I
It was their
believe.
job in ancient times. The scribes meant they wrote the scriptures. Well, in Jeremiah,
Wasn't the scribes, it
chapter 8
was
and verse
the
8, it talks about the scribes. Now, some Jews will tell you that
it
Jeremiah
was-
is the only authentic book left in the whole Bible.
Well, the scribes copied
I
it.
believe that myself, but that's how sure they are about Jeremiah. The most authentic book in the Bible.
Yeah, oh, no, it's not. It's all authentic.
It says, "How can you say, we are wise, and the law of the Lord is with us? But behold, the false pen of the scribe has made it into a lie." See, in this place,
If that means all of the Bible and not just copies of it,
so sure that everything you have in your hand is
then
scripture.
the Quran is
Scribes
false
write lies
for
with
saying
their
it
pens.
confirms
Watch
that
out.
which went before it.
Where are
It
the
also
lies?
makes it a lie to say that all his words can't be changed or altered.
So
And
what
all
I'm
his
trying to
words
get at is
are
that
the Bible.
Muslim agrees with most churches. Most churches say, yes, the Bible contains the words of God and some other words besides that. The Muslim agrees. The Bible contains the words of God and some other words. It's only a minority Christian position who will say every word in the Bible came from God.
Yeah, it's
None of it
the
came from God. It's
fundamentalists.
a minority view, but it seems to be the view that the missionary feels he has to sell, even if he doesn't believe it himself. There's many ways of establishing that fact, but a basic point is made in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 8. This is a verse that some people like so much. The Bible I have there is a New American Standard. They put it on the inside front cover. They like this verse so much. Isaiah 40 and 8. It says, "The grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our God stands forever."
And if you read the Dead Sea Scrolls, that's turned out to be true, because the meaning of the Dead Sea Scrolls matches the meaning that you have within the Old Testament. The only thing that's different is that Esther is missing in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So Isaiah has been proved correct. And the Dead Sea Scrolls disprove Mormonism and Islam, because it shows that there's no change in meaning
in the original
in the
manuscript.
Old Testament
Not the manuscripts we have today, in the original.
with the Dead Sea Scrolls.
So that if you show someone, look, this disagrees with that, or this is incorrect, and so on, he can tell you, that's true, that's a mistake. But that mistake was not in the original.
That's
Ask him,
right.
how did the mistake get here? He'll tell you, the original got lost.
No, the original didn't get lost because we got the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Was it?
It shows that there's no change.
Isaiah 40 and
In
8
the Old
says,
Testament,
God
for
says
sure.
it doesn't get lost. The verse doesn't say, the grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God stands forever, except for a few little details. There's no qualification. And books have been written documenting the errors, and yet this excuse is still offered. You see, if the missionary would only make this concession, if he would only say, all right, not all of the Bible came from God, he'd be more believable. I don't know,
Only to the
a friend of
atheists.
mine in Toronto who was besieged
And the Muslims.
by a missionary group there, the Fellowship of Faith, whose whole goal in life is to convert Muslims, surrounded by them constantly. Gave him all kinds of literature in that. And finally he told me, he said, you know, the miracle of this book, he meant the Bible, he says, is that people believe it came from God. So that's the miracle.
Well, Muslims say the miracle of the Quran is that it was written.
On the other hand, they'll tell you, well, except here, it's not
That's the only miracle of all, the only miracle that Muhammad did.
Consistent with the claim. If the missionary would say, not everything that we call Scripture should be called Scripture, if he would only say that, he'd be more believable.
Only if you believe that the Quran is wrong when it says it confirms that which went before it, and has Quran 1094, which tells Muslims they have it tells Muslims to come to those who read the before scriptures, the Bible, if they're in doubt about the Quran. Yeah. I wonder he didn't talk about Quran 1094 or Quran 568 or 548, which says that the Quran confirms whatever scripture came before it. Whatever scripture came before it. Oh, why they didn't talk about that? Strange. Oh well.